So next up, let's explore why the future of the office isn't an office with Jacob Morgan that's here today, thanks to the wonderful sponsorship of JCI. He is the author of the book that you probably picked up when you checked in this morning on the future of work. And in addition to being an author, he also has a company called Chess Media, a management and consultancy, and he's also got a community of practice that is an invite-only members for the future of work. So very interesting, I think, discussion that Jacob's going to have, and we welcome you to WorkTech.
Thank you. Do I get a clicker? Oh, I have a microphone. I just need a clicker. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to play. Oh, my goodness. I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit and challenge everyone to think, do we need an office? So I'm really curious to hear, how many of you guys think we have to work from an office? An office is the primary location where you should get work done. How many of you think an office needs to be the primary location where you work? Okay, well, if nobody's raising their hand, clearly I don't need to be here. Okay, there's a couple people. Okay. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. Now, well, first of all, I should say thank you very much to Johnson Controls for getting copies of the book. I really appreciate it, and I hope you guys all enjoy it. The book explores what the future of work is going to look like, not just from a technology standpoint, but how managers, employees, and organizations are evolving. And flexible work and remote work and offices is certainly a part of that. And that's what I'm going to spend most of my time talking about today. So a little bit about me. Obviously, there's the book, and I run something called the FOW community. And it's essentially an advisory network where organizations from around the world come together to explore what the future of work is going to look like. We provide them with access to resources, and they share best practices and advice with each other. These are companies like Wells Fargo, Walmart, Nike, Intel, a lot of large brands that are all trying to figure out what is the future of work going to look like. And we talk about things like millennials, Internet of Things, collaboration technologies, all sorts of different types of things. And it's a really great place for all these companies to come together, but it's also a very fantastic learning ground for me, because I get to hear firsthand what a lot of these organizations are thinking about, what they're concerned with, what they're exploring. Now, I interviewed quite a few organizations for this book to find out what are some of the world's most forward-thinking and progressive organizations thinking about, what are they doing, what are they exploring. And it was very fascinating to me to learn how big of a role flexible work and teleworking in the office plays. And in fact, many of the organizations that I spoke with are moving away from this idea of having an office as the main place that you work. And these are large organizations. We're talking about companies like Unisys or IBM or Wells Fargo or Unilever. I mean, these are huge organizations that are trying to create distributed workplaces. So my goal today, to play devil's advocate, is to give you 8 reasons for why a workplace isn't the only place we need to go to get work done. Now, before we get to that, I want to talk about the 5 trends that are shaping the future of work. And this is, of course, in the book towards the beginning. But I think it's a great way to kind of explore why this is starting to happen. Why are these conversations becoming so important? So these are the 5 trends that are shaping the future of work. The first one we have is new behaviors. What do I mean by new behaviors? Well, if you were to look a couple years ago, people would have thought you were crazy if you were to tell them that you're going to have all your information up on Facebook, you're going to have your professional history on LinkedIn, you're going to tell people where you are on Foursquare. People would think that you're nuts. But look at where we are today, just a couple years later. We're so comfortable living a public life. We expect real-time feedback on Twitter, right? We do all these great things on these social channels, and these are creating new behaviors. We build communities. It's easy for us to find and access information. We control technology, right? I mean, has anybody here heard of a company called Instacart? A couple people? Okay, I mean, this is a good example, right? Instacart, an organization, you buy your groceries online, they pick them up from Whole Foods or wherever you shop, and they deliver them to you, right? These are all sorts of new behaviors that we're seeing that were never possible before. So that's one thing that we're seeing. The second thing is around new technologies. And some of the previous speakers alluded to some of these technologies. We, of course, have things like big data. We have collaboration platforms. We have the Internet of Things. We have robots and automation. We have all sorts of new technologies that are making their way into the workplace as well. The third one is the millennial workforce. Now, I am a millennial. I have to get that out of the way. But I think it's important to point out that a lot of emphasis is always placed on millennials. Now, it's true that millennials are having an impact on the future of work, but they are one of the many trends that we're seeing. And millennials aren't the only generation that is a part of the workforce. We have, of course, many generations. And it's not the first time that many generations have had to work together. I mean, in the 60s with other generations, everybody thought the hippies are going to ruin the world. And look, everything turned out just fine. So just because we have millennials entering the workforce doesn't mean that it's just about the millennials and they're changing everything. And I'll talk about this in an upcoming slide, but it's actually new behaviors that all sorts of employees are exhibiting. Whether you're a millennial, whether you're a Gen Xer, whether you're a baby, it doesn't matter, right? A lot of these new behaviors are impacting all sorts of generations, not just millennials. But the reason why millennials are such an important factor to consider is because by 2020, they're going to become the majority of the workforce. By 2025, they're going to be 75% of the workforce. So this is the vast majority of employees that are quote-unquote digital natives. These are many people that don't know what it's like to sit in a cubicle or to get 250 emails a day or to commute an hour and a half each way to and from work. So this is the majority of the workforce that we're going to be seeing entering our organizations, and that's why a lot of attention is being placed on them. The fourth trend that we're seeing is around mobility. A couple of years ago, I spent a month in China with a buddy of mine, not work-related, just for fun, exploring all over the place. And one of the places that we went to is Yunnan. It's a southern province. And we rented bikes, and we went out in these remote rice paddy fields, kind of in the middle of nowhere. And what was fascinating to me is that while we were biking around, there was somebody working in the rice paddy field that had a smartphone. Now, I live in the Bay Area, which many people consider to be kind of the tech and innovation hub where all of these technologies are happening. Here is somebody in a remote rice paddy field in Yunnan that could access the same people, the same information, the same data, the same companies that I could living in the Bay Area. And he is in a remote rice paddy field in Yunnan, up to his knees in water, right? So that just goes to show that where you are no longer makes a difference. Not just for the employee, but for the organization as well, right? Organizations are able to tap into a global talent pool. And I'll bring this up a little bit later. Has anybody heard about the recent news with Reddit? Anybody? A couple of people? Okay, I'll mention that in a couple of minutes on one of the upcoming slides. I'm just kind of curious if you guys are familiar. The fifth trend that we're seeing is around globalization. And globalization, of course, has pros and cons. There are a lot of debates happening around this. But to put it succinctly, globalization is essentially the idea of operating in a world where boundaries do not exist, where the world itself is becoming like a city. It doesn't matter where you're based. It doesn't matter what language you speak. It doesn't matter what currency you transact in. Culture is becoming less of a factor. So all these things are playing less and less of a role. Now, when many people think of the office, the first offices were around 1906, so a little over 100 years ago. And I don't know why I got cut off there. Sorry about that. But Sears was one of the first organizations that kind of pioneered this idea of the office. And these are some pictures of what the then modern-day office looked like. They were very similar, and they were designed so that employees or clerks can kind of manage paper and interactions. So, Mike, and this is actually a definition of what an office is supposed to be. And you guys can decide if you agree or not with this definition. But basically, the main purpose of an office is to support its occupants in performing their job, preferably at minimal cost. So we'll just give you the cheapest desk and the cheapest chair, the cheapest technology, and to maximum job satisfaction. In other words, we're going to give you the cheapest crap that we can give you, and you are going to perform to your maximum ability. That's fair, right? So most offices in the world, and this is the big challenge with offices, it's not that offices are bad, but most offices in the world today are not an accurate representation of the people that work there. In other words, we live in 2014 and we work as if it's 1975. Now, in the Bay Area, you'll find there's some amazing offices that are here. Herman Miller, I heard, has a fantastic office space. Airbnb has an amazing office space if you get a chance to see it. Lithium Technologies, an amazing office space. Now, these are all organizations where employees actually show up to work every day. But they show up when they want. They show up, where they want within their facility. And these are places that actually represent how the employees want to work. They're not cubicles. And most organizations today still have that type of environment. In other words, you live in one year and in one decade, and when you show up to work, you're teleported back in time, decades, and you are expected to kind of make that mental shift, right? But it's not possible because you have these expectations and idea in your head of how things should be, and your organization is the exact opposite of that. And what does that create? That creates resentment, that creates disengagement, that creates lack of productivity, and it makes you not want to be there. I mean, who would want to be in an organization that is decades in the past of where it should be, right? Nobody. So that is a big challenge for a lot of organizations today. So over 100 years since the modern day office has been created, my question is, do we still need to rely on offices as the place where we get work done? I'm going to argue no. And I'm going to leave some time at the end for Q&A for you guys to yell at me and disagree with me as much as you can. Here are the 8 reasons why. And again, I don't know why the formatting came up. It wasn't like this on my computer, I promise. So these are the 8 reasons why, and I'm going to go through each one in a little bit in more detail. The first one is collaboration technologies. The second one is a new generation and a new type of worker. Number 3, companies can create a more attractive workplace. Number 4, companies save money by not having offices. Number 5, employees save time. Number 6, employees are more productive. And number 7, the overall quality of life is improved for employees. And number 8 is we see a new type of workplace. So the first one, collaboration technologies. How many of you here are working in organizations that are using some type of collaborative technologies, Yammer, Jive, video conferencing, etc.? I suppose I should have said, is anybody here not using any of it? Is anybody here not using any of those types of technologies so we can all laugh and point at you? Okay, so just looking, nobody raised their hands. So most companies in the world are doing something in this space. They have some technologies in place. They have some tools that are in place. I saw a recent statistic that showed that over the next 3 years, the adoption of collaboration platforms is going to go up by 65%. Why? Right? It's in order to support employees to work anywhere, anytime, and on any device. So this is number 1, the first reason why I think we don't need to rely on offices. We have technologies, right? We have apps on our phone where you can open the phone, open the app, and you can see what your colleagues are working on, what tasks are assigned to you. You have the computing power in your smartphone now that entire desktops and laptops had just a few short years ago. You are walking around with everything that you need to get your job done as long as you have access to Wi-Fi. You no longer need to be sitting in an office so that a manager can see you to know that you're working. Reason number 2, we have a new type of worker. And I touched on this before. It's not just the millennials. I mean, the millennials are going to be the majority of the workforce over the next couple of years. But we also see a new type of worker as far as a mental mindset, as far as behaviors, as far as attitudes and ideas. I was at a conference not too long ago, and the whole conversation of millennials came up. And I said, look, if you were to take out all the millennials from your entire organization, you would still have plenty of employees that care about flexible work, that care about doing meaningful work, that want to work in an organization where their values are aligned. This isn't just about millennials and a younger generation entering the workplace. It's about a new type of worker. Anybody that is using these types of technologies and has these new behaviors in their personal life is a new type of worker. You could be 22 or 82. It does not matter. So that's reason number 2. Reason number 3, you create a more attractive workplace. Not too long ago, we did a survey, and we asked, how does having a flexible work environment impact your view of the organization? And we found that 90% of workers believe that an organization offering flexible work environments is more attractive to them than an organization that does not. Now, I mentioned Reddit a couple minutes ago. I don't know if anybody's heard the news, but Reddit recently, I believe they raised $50 million. Is anybody here familiar with Reddit, the company, just in general? Okay. So user-generated content, you put it up, people vote on it, they have discussions, etc. They recently raised $50 million, and they said, we are getting rid of all flexible work and telework. If you're an employee that works for Reddit, you have a choice. You either relocate to San Francisco, where everybody is going to be, or you're out of a job. That's your choice. Move to San Francisco, or you're out of a job. You can imagine that there were a lot of angry people. Reddit was built by flexible workers. It was built by people that have never been into an office, and now the organization is telling them, you have to come into the office or you lose your job. And people were upset about it for several reasons. Not only were the employees upset that helped build the company, but the challenging thing is that it made the assumption that the only place you can get top talent is in San Francisco. And that is not true. Right? I work with a lot of freelancers, with a lot of people in different parts of the world that do amazing things. Right? Talent is no longer just about being in New York or San Francisco or next to Harvard or next to Stanford or top-tier universities. You can attract and retain top talent anywhere in the world, regardless of where you are or regardless of where the organization is. This is reason number 3. And just to kind of add the icing on top of the cake there, almost half of working adults would be willing to give back around 9% of their salary to work for an organization that provides a flexible work environment. Up to 9% of their salary. That's a big number. Reason number 4, companies save a lot of money by not having offices. There's a website called Global Workplace Analytics. They do a fantastic job of aggregating statistics around flexible work and telework. I highly recommend you check it out. They have pros and cons. They do all sorts of analysis. It's fantastic. And a lot of my numbers came from there. What they found that the average real estate savings costs for one employee for the year is around $10,000. If you have thousands of employees, you can do the math to see how quickly that adds up. Nearly 6 out of 10 employers identify cost savings as a significant benefit to telecommuting. Unilever, one of the organizations featured in the book, they had a big goal that they wanted to set out to achieve within the next few years. They said, we want to double our workforce and cut our carbon footprint in half. How do you do that? How do you double an organization that already has hundreds of thousands of employees while cutting the carbon footprint in half? They introduced a program called Agile Working. The idea that employees can work anywhere, anytime, on any device. You are measured by the things that you create, not how much time you spend creating them. So you're measured by outputs, not by inputs. It's a fantastic program. If you Google Unilever Agile Working, you'll see it, read about it. It's a very cool program. Another statistic is unscheduled absences cost employers around $1,800 per employee per year, which is a lot of money. Right? Oftentimes what happens is we say that we can't come into work for whatever reason, and that reason is unbeknownst to the employer. Sometimes we just don't want to show up, sometimes we're sick, sometimes we have things to do. Having a flexible work environment solves that problem because it allows the employee to take control of their schedule. Reason number 5, employees save a lot of time. I was shocked when I found this statistic. And this is in the United States. I'd be really curious to hear and do some research to find out what the number is in the UK and other parts of the world. But in the United States, 600,000 employees travel 90 minutes and 50 miles to work each way. Each way. So we are talking about 3 hours a day, 15 hours a week sitting in a car. That's a part-time job, sitting in a car. That sucks. 10.8 million employees travel an hour each way. That's 10 hours a week in a car. Still a part-time job. That is an enormous amount of time and money and resources that we are spending sitting in a car. I have not seen any research to date that shows that flexible work or telework or not showing up in an office hinders or hurts productivity or engagement or innovation and collaboration. In fact, in my previous book, which was all about collaboration, there was a study that was done by a sociologist named T.J. Allen. And he found that once employees are a couple hundred feet away from each other, the chances of them communicating and collaborating drops to virtually 0. So being down the hall is virtually equivalent to being across the city. So again, employees save a lot of time. Number 6, employees are more productive and engaged. And these are the stats. You can look these up. Gallup did some very interesting research on this. And again, the Global Workplace Analytics website have some fascinating stats. Businesses lose $600 billion a year in workplace distractions. It takes, on average, an employee 16 minutes to refocus after they get disrupted by something at work. Number 7, and just because I want to wrap up and get to questions and hear some of your guys' feedback, an improved quality of life. This was a fascinating study that was done by the Umeå University in Sweden. And they found couples in which one partner commutes for longer than 45 minutes are 40% likelier to divorce. We're not just talking about the impact that this has on the workplace. We're talking about the impact that this has on employees in their life. Right? It is a huge impact. Work is one of the leading causes of stress. We spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year on stress-related issues. 70% Americans say work is their biggest cause of stress. We don't need to add to that by adding commuting to it. Number 8, we have new workspaces. I touched on this before. A workspace is anywhere that you can connect to the internet. It is anywhere that you can plug into an outlet. It is anywhere that you can connect to Wi-Fi. And if you need to, it's anywhere that you can meet face-to-face with somebody, whether it be a co-working location, a coffee shop, a home office, a library. It doesn't matter. The notion of flexible work is all about choice. It's giving employees the freedom and the right to choose when and where they want to work. And if that happens to be an office for them that they choose they want to go to, then that's fine. So will offices go away? Sadly not. I don't think offices will go away, but I think 2 things are going to happen. One is we will definitely see an increase in flexible work. And I think the recent Johnson Controls Workplace 3030 study, or 2030 study, 3030, that would be interesting. So the recent 2030 workplace study, I think, found that flexible work is going to become even more prevalent. The second thing I think we're going to see is a complete redesign of what a workspace is, right? It is going to align more with how the employee wants to work and with the year or the decade that we actually work in. It's absurd. And I think we're seeing a dramatic shift. And some companies, Microsoft did a great job presenting theirs. There are a lot of fascinating organizations that are making this shift and redesigning their spaces. So, I think I have a couple of minutes for questions, right? Hopefully?
I think we've got 3 minutes.
Okay, so I'll open it up to questions. There's a lot more I wanted to say, but I'm going to be here upstairs, by the way, if anybody wants a signed copy of the book. I'll be upstairs after the coffee break for a few minutes, and I'm happy to chat more up there.
So, any questions for Jacob? All right.
Only this part of the room cares.
I'm Natalie Grasso with Work Design Magazine, and I'm curious if you've run into any numbers. If companies are losing $600 billion a year, was it $600 billion?
Collectively.
Collectively, that's productivity-related costs from distractions in the office. Have you run into any numbers about distractions if they're not in the office?
Well, the studies that I have seen that were done that actually show that employees that work remotely tend to be more productive. So, in other words, they might have distractions, but they actually spend more time working, not because they're forced to, but because they want to and because they can. So, all the studies that I have seen so far, and if anybody has seen studies otherwise, I'd love to hear about them. Most of the studies that I have seen so far all show that if you are given the opportunity to work flexibly, to choose how you want to work, you are more productive. Right? You spend more time doing the things that you need to get done, and you do a better job doing it. So, again, I haven't seen any studies to the contrary, but if anybody has seen them, I would love to learn about them.
So, Jacob, I've got a question for you.
Yes.
Because you're kind of singing to the choir here. Many of us have been down this path of envisioning this new way of working that really does support the person and for the human. And a lot of the people that are designing the spaces are creating those kinds of environments. My question, in terms of the audience that you work with in leadership and management, since it makes so much sense to us, why is it taking so long?
Because there was no reason to do it. There was no reason a couple of years ago to do this. And that is because the number one motivating factor used to be for a lot of organizations, or the biggest asset that organizations had to attract employees was cash. Right? You pay the most amount of money and you bring in the highest top talent. Now we're seeing that employees care about things aside from, in other words, money is still towards the top, but a lot of employees care about things besides money. And so in that type of environment, where money isn't always the number one factor to attract and retain top talent, You have to start to think about other things that you should be doing. Right? Before, you gave somebody a desk and said, I'll pay you 100 grand. Hey, that's fine. They'll just show up and they'll work on that crappy desk, on that plastic chair. Nobody cares. But today, employees are becoming more picky. There are a lot more opportunities for them, right? They start thinking about, oh, should I work for Uber and just drive a car, or should I go join Yahoo? I mean, I had an UberX driver that had an MBA in finance, and he said, I don't want to work in a cubicle. I have flexibility to do what I want. People are now going on Elance and Odesk. People are now renting out their homes on Airbnb. So there are all sorts of different revenue opportunities that you raise money on Indiegogo or Kickstarter to start your own company. So there was no incentive before for organizations to have to rethink what they need to do to attract and retain top talent.
Yes, I think.
And now they have to, right? They have to. Because if they don't, people will just not want to work there. The war for talent has never been more fierce, and Dan Pink has a great quote, and he says, organizations need, or talented people need organizations far less than organizations need talented people. In other words, if you're good at something, you don't need the organization as much as the organization needs you. So the organizations are doing what they can to bring you in.
Well, great. Well, let's give Jacob a round of applause.
Thank you.